Hello, hello. Welcome, folks. Welcome. So glad you could spend your morning, afternoon, potentially evening with us here. We're going to get started now, and welcome to our Ask Us Anything here at Zapier, where we have Courtney and myself here. I'd love to do a quick intro for first. So, hello, my name is Christina Romein. I'm an executive assistant to the CPO and CFO here at Zapier. I've been at Zapier for about 8.5 years. Started at Zapier in our technical support team and transitioned to exec support almost 3 years ago. Now our EA team is 7 people serving 800 person company globally, and we're fully remote. I'm based here in rainy Vancouver, Canada, and yeah, it's we have a rainfall warning over here. And I'm joined by Cortney. Cortney is our executive business partner for our CEO at Zapier, and she's been here at Zapier for 5 years, and she's down in sunny San Diego. And well, let's dig in. First, I'd love to start off with a humble brag because I think it's always nice here to celebrate our wins and everything on what we're doing really well. So I'd love to hear from you all in the chat. What's a win that you had this week that you want to celebrate? What's something awesome that you just want to share out with everybody in the chat? And what's an accomplishment that you've had this week? For myself, I would say that a win for me, I came back from a trip last weekend to Oaxaca, Mexico, and I fully disconnected. I didn't check Slack, I didn't check emails, and I think that was a great win. What about you, Courtney? What's a win that you want to celebrate?
I think hosting this AMA is something, maybe it's too soon to say, but yeah, I'm really excited to have so many folks in similar roles here so we can all learn from each other.
Yeah, awesome. I see a couple of wins in here. So Christine Gorman onboarded an AI program in her team. And Pablo says that they kept their sanity with all the AI daily updates because we know that there's so many updates and some folks celebrated their children's birthdays. And just great to see you all. Thank you so much for sharing some of the wins that you all have had. A couple of housekeeping items. So this webinar is being recorded and we will email you the recording after the webinar. We had a ton of questions pre-submitted, and so thank you for folks who submitted the questions ahead of time. But we should have time for some live Q&A. So throughout the webinar, go ahead and enter any questions that you might have in the Q&A tab at any time. And then you can also upvote any questions from other attendees so we can help prioritize those questions. Again, so make sure to drop those questions in the Q&A box and not the chat box because those will get lost in all the chatter that's happening right now in the chat. If you run into any technical issues, simply refresh your page. That usually solves everything, and we recommend using Google Chrome as your browser. So here's what we're going to do today. So first, we'll talk about why this matters and why the moment is now. And next, we'll discuss AI fluency for executive operations roles. Our team here at Zapier has created an AI fluency rubric, and we'd love to share with you what that looks like in practice. And then next, we'll go through those pre-submitted AMA questions. Thank you again to all the folks who shared questions during registration. We received over 100 questions, and so we've grouped them into similar themes for today's discussion. Finally, we'll reserve some time for some actual live Q&A. So again, as I mentioned previously, please drop any questions in the Q&A tab and upvote the questions that you want answered, and we'll address those questions today, and then we'll wrap up the session. So first, I would love to pass the mic to Courtney to go over AI fluency for EAs.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. So this is my big inspirational statement here that I like to start with when I talk to EAs. I think it's normal to be scared about new technology like automation, AI, but I think when you think back to every shift in technology and how we work, each of those has created new kinds of opportunities and leaders. And so I just like to reinforce that the people who thrive in these shifts aren't necessarily the most technical. They actually are the ones who have more of those skills like thriving in ambiguity, helping others navigate change, like those things that help make this moment such an opportunity for EAs. So, we've always been the connective tissue for our teams. We understand what needs to get done, also how it actually gets done. We really are, as like work evolves with AI and automation, the people that can help our execs and give them that same steady guidance to help them adapt and help our companies adapt. So I think, your thought partners who help design better ways of working. And when I say this moment was made for us, I think it's just like a reminder that it's a great time to move from behind the scenes to being right alongside your leaders and help them shape how this next era of work actually comes to life. So on the like actual front of maybe some more logistics about what I think here, the EAs need to future-proof their skill sets consistently, not just to keep up, but to lead. And so as the EA role is evolving rapidly with this change, we have to kind of evolve to tools that help us work smarter and scale our impact. So, we want to spend less time chasing calendar invites and more time solving real problems, driving strategy. So I think the truth here, and the one the one call to action I'd say is like, the more your value is tied to manual repetitive work, the more vulnerable your role does become. So we can adapt now, not just to save time, but to build these systems, operate within them, and learn how to automate the repeatable parts of our jobs so we can do the human side. And I really don't want EAs to wait until these tools are handed to them. I think we can be building it ourselves. So even if you're at a company who's not at the forefront of this AI transformation and automation, you can, hopefully this AMA gives you some of the confidence to start. And these are the kind of workflows I'm talking about, like how we can go from being slow and not slow, but like reactive to how work is being done, to being more proactive and strategic. So these are a few examples of just workflows that can eat up hours of your time and things you have to do manually over and over again. But we can use them as examples of what happens when we automate a layer or a piece of our process. And the end result will be being able to be more proactive because you have less context switching, less time chasing, and more capacity for the high value work. So these might seem like simple wins, but as you solve each of these things with automation, they are one step towards getting your time back, and they add up fast. So there are certain parts of the adminning that are likely to be absorbed by AI and automation, and it's not an if, it's a when. But what's not going to be absorbed is the strategic exec support and exec ops. So this is a big mindset shift for everyone in this role, but I do think we're uniquely positioned to actually gain a lot of opportunities due to these advancements and ways of working. So that's why we've kind of established this AI Fluency Rubric. So at Zapier, org-wide, we have an AI Fluency Rubric, and we have kind of raised the bar on our hiring. So we expect 100% of new Zapier hires to be AI fluent in some way. And that totally depends on the role, but we knew we had to define what that actually means for our roles as EAs. So we built this rubric, and we'll send the slides after. So no need to like try to capture this all right now, but as a high level look at the journey, you go from unacceptable to transformative. And at the unacceptable level, that is, resisting AI, sticking to manual tasks because you think that it's not going to give you value, or it's not going to be able to, it's going to take away too much of your job. But then once you keep going up the rubric, at capable, you might start using tools like ChatGPT and Fathom for summaries and simple workflows. At adoptive, you really start embedding your AI into your daily work. You might automate some of those recurring tasks. You might build some prompt libraries so your team can learn from you. But then once you get to transformative, that's like really redesigning how execs work. That is coaching others and driving systems level change. So this isn't something that happens overnight, and we're not looking for our EAs to become engineers, but we are asking them to think critically about, where can AI create leverage for us? How can we use it responsibly? So I'd be curious if folks take a look at this and maybe drop in chat where you think you are on this scale right now. But as you keep using AI, not everything you do is going to be transformative. And so once you get to that level, it doesn't mean you're doing that every day. You could be jumping up and down between the rubric of like, okay, some of the stuff I do is just in this capable category where I'm getting small wins. Some of it is maybe sharing with peers in the adopted category, but then maybe you have one thing a half or a quarter or a year where you really are putting your energy to try to do something transformative that changes how your company works. So to give an example from Zapier, we have something more in the transformative category is we've built this GPT, ChatGPT, that is a exec prep GPT. So basically it has a ton of context on how our execs think, make decisions, and give feedback. And before going into any meeting now that requires a strategic review, teams put their documents through that exec prep GPT to get simulated exec reactions on their doc and get suggestions for what things they should add or how they should frame things differently so that we spend less time in meetings trying to navigate those things and have it really upfront. So that would be something that really changes the way the whole org works, but that's not something that happens overnight, and it's not something that happens alone. So I'd love to just share this rubric with folks so they can start to understand where you're at on the journey, and it's totally okay wherever you're at, but hopefully this is a step forward in the right direction. So that was my spiel. Thanks for listening to the overview there, but I want to spend most of our time on y'all's questions. We got a ton of great pre-submitted questions, and then we'll do some live Q&A too. So Christina, do you want to lead us through the AMA portion?
Yes, let us do it. I just want to say in the chat, I'm seeing people on there saying that it's a range from capable all the way to transformative, and it's just so neat to see just how folks in our roles are just where they are in the AI Fluency Rubric, and it's just really neat to see that. So AMA questions. So again, we received over 100 questions submitted by you in advance for the AMA. Thank you for sending those questions, and let's just jump right into those. So the first theme that we saw was around mindset and leadership questions. And the first question here from Ellie is, if you had to choose one thing that EAs should change or start doing to deliver the most strategic impact for their execs and teams, what would it be? Cortney, let's pass it to you.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, and I'm going to talk about it from like maybe the mindset level here. So I think I'd have to go with like, stop putting yourself in a box if you are. So when I was early on at Zapier, I've been here for 5 years now, but this was my first EA role. And I really saw my job early on as keeping things running smoothly for Wade. Who was our CEO, I didn't speak up in bigger forums. I wasn't really contributing in team settings. I would tell him what I thought behind the scenes, but I wouldn't really change, or contribute to larger exec team discussions or larger org discussions. But over time, he really pushed me to, step on toes before we drop the ball on something. And that mindset shift totally changed how I showed up. So in practice, that looked like me starting to hold others accountable. Instead of just supporting him quietly or giving him feedback quietly, it made me feel less like an assistant and more like part of the leadership team. And so I started speaking up at exec offsites and giving execs some pretty critical feedback. And so I think the biggest shift is realizing that your job isn't just one thing. It's not just to protect your exec's time. It's amplifying their impact across the org. And you have such a unique vantage point that I think just go for it and make sure you're speaking up and not putting your role in a box and trying new things. What about you, Christina?
Yeah, Cortney, I really love what you said about stepping outside the box. And I'd add to that EAs deliver the most strategic impact when they embrace being something that's called T-shaped generalist. And some folks may have already heard about this. What this means is that us as EAs, we go deep in one area. So whether that's executive support, communications, or operations, but we stay broad enough, like a T, to understand and connect across disciplines. So whether that's marketing, finance, AHR, product, and so on. So that cross-functional awareness helps us to see patterns that others might miss, and it helps to connect the dots faster and anticipate what our leaders or our teams need before they ask. The other thing that's been on my mind a lot lately, and I feel like when we've chatted with other EAs, it's just learning to emphasizing that we need to learn to say no more often. So EAs, naturally, we're wired to help. We just want to help every single person, right? But it's so easy to say yes to everything. But when everything becomes a priority, nothing truly is a priority. And so from the conversations that we've had, the most strategic EAs learn to protect their focus, and they filter the requests, delegate where possible, and really channel their energy towards what drives the highest leverage for their execs and their teams. So again, in short, in summary, it's being a strategic EA is knowing when to go wide and when to go deep and when to say no, so that you can stay focused on what actually moves the business forward.
Yeah, I love that. I love always, each EA and our team having a project that's outside of their, day-to-day scope. So they can be working on something more strategic at a time. So yeah, I love it, Christina.
Yeah. Well, let's go into Pete's question here. So for people that are looking to showcase the possibilities of AI, so for folks who are managing upwards, and that's generally most EAs, what would have compelled old you to make these changes if you didn't have the culture around you that Zapier has embedded? Cortney, what do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm naturally learn by doing and like to shake things up. So some of it is definitely just like a personality trait. But I think you know, thinking wider, honestly, I'd probably want to see someone like me doing it and, learn from their example. I think the hardest part isn't necessarily learning the tools. It's getting over that voice like this isn't in my lane or like, I can't make these changes, kind of like what I was saying about don't put yourself in a box. But I think Zapier does have a culture that encourages experimentation. But if I didn't have that, I would have probably started small with something like this. Start with things that are low stakes, like automating meeting notes or prepping briefs or things that only touch my desk. And then, or I would focus on pain points the exec already cares about, like things they're bringing up, like, oh, I have too many emails, or I'm missing context, or decisions don't have enough data backed, and try to like solve one of those visibly. And by visibly, I mean doing those in a public channel or public forum. And then once you start doing that, people might start asking questions, and that curiosity becomes a bit of like a permission slip to keep going. So I think like, as I was gaining my confidence at Zapier, I was trying to like showcase these small things that I knew my exec already cared about, focus on the pain he was already feeling. And then he was like, oh, okay. And then that definitely becomes like this, permission to experiment and keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you said, Courtney. It really is about that aha moment. So when you see someone like us as like EAs or a chief of staff using AI in a really tangible or effective way, it just clicks. And so I completely agree with starting small. So looking for those low effort and low risk tasks, like the ones that you mentioned with like automating follow-ups or pulling data for a briefing and letting that success build the momentum. When I was thinking about this question, the thing that really stood out for me was we had the speaker at a recent leadership offsite who said something that just stuck with me. The window to reskill is shrinking faster than ever. And that just really hit me. It made me realize that it's not optional. Learning to use AI and automation isn't just about staying current. It's about staying relevant and really multiplying our impact. So for me, it's both the excitement and the necessity. If we want to stay ahead, we can't wait for permission. We can't wait for somebody to say, here you go, here's the tools to use. We need to be proactively learning and being curious. And I imagine that a lot of people that are here today are those kinds of folks who are keen and eager to learn. So we have to create that gap. So experimenting, showing what's possible, and letting that open the door for others.
Yeah, I totally agree, Christina.
So this next question comes from Chris. Chris asks, one of the biggest barriers to executive AI adoption is trusting that it works, that nothing is slipping through the cracks. How do you build that trust with your execs when using AI automations? Courtney, what do you
This is a
think?
great question. Yeah, I love this question. I think that it's, of course, natural for execs to be skeptical here, especially when it comes to something like comms from them, or, there are places that are more high stakes. So I think the best way here is to start with transparency. That is one of our biggest values at Zapier. So we already have a bit of that culture here, but essentially, I believe that you have to show your work and be clear about the AI and automations you want to use so that you don't get out too far in front of your exec and turn it into something that's maybe misaligned or erodes trust. And everything you can do with AI automations can have a human in the loop element as well. So you can always have something sent to you first before it goes to your exec. And so building in the human in the loop and then showing your work. So when I'm on the showing the work front, when I'm about to try a new system, like an AI automation with my exec, I will literally write it out like a mini experiment. So I'll have it problem, my pilot idea, what the human in a loop checkpoint is. So for example, like the problem might be you're missing key emails because they're buried in your inbox. And then the pilot idea would be, okay, each morning I'm going to run a workflow that pulls your top 5 most important email messages into a short digest. And then I'm going to have it send it to me in Slack. I'll review before sending, click approve, and then it goes to them. So the point is to make them feel like part of the process you're designing and not like, oh, AI is suddenly deciding what emails I get to see. So try to like bring them in for the process, and then it's all about iteration from there. Like try it for a week. You can say we just have to try this for a week, and then at the end of the week, did this actually help? How could we tweak it? And so that consistent like iteration also builds the trust, and then they start to rely on it eventually without even remembering or realizing that it's mostly automated. So I think you can kind of like have those small wins, and then over time they'll just get so used to it that they'll be wanting you to do more and more of it. But that's definitely from my personal experience at Zapier. So Christina, I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I really like that framework, Courtney, like the way you've described it. And I've taken a similar approach recently when I moved 2 of my execs from one to-do system to another that was more automated. So it was all about clearly defining that problem, what's not working, why a change is needed, and then laying out a few different options. So a teammate, one of our teammates here at in the EA team at Zapier, she calls it a menu. Present a menu of options, basically, and explaining the pros and cons of each, and just asking like which one feels most comfortable for you. And then that part, getting their buy-in early, is really critical for building trust. And so then once they choose the direction, it's implementing it and then setting up regular check-ins. So we look at what was working, what wasn't, and where we could refine things. And it wasn't a one and done rollout of here we go, this is complete, this is done. So Courtney, like what you said, it really was iterative. And that's really the key. It was starting small, giving them visibility into the process, and then keeping them in the loop as things were being adjusted. And over time, those small, reliable wins were what built confidence. So not just in the automation that you created, but in you as a person who is guiding how it's being used. So love that framework.
You understood the system, you knew how it could be better, and you positioned it for them before. Love that.
Awesome. Well, those are the themes for around mindset and leadership. Let's move into execution and impact. So the first question here comes from Aratsa. How do you measure the impact or ROI that your builds bring? Courtney, I'd love to pass it off to you.
Yeah, this is a hard question. I think it's hard in general to have tangible ROI in the EA role. So this isn't uniquely to builds, but in general for a role. But I think I try to tell the story instead of just trying to show math. So for example, I built an AI-powered candidate briefing agent for the interviews that my exec does. So in my impact review, like our annual review, I might outline the before state, show the after state, and say like, okay, before every prep doc looked different. Execs weren't approaching interviews in a strategic way. Some execs were walking into interviews not prepped. And then explain the after. Now every exec interviewer gets a clean, consistent brief in minutes from the time the interview is scheduled. And I think you could tie this to time saved. Like you could estimate that based on this. But since the process that I fixed or created, like it wasn't good to begin with, I think I might try to get like a quote from a stakeholder instead. So like, our execs are great at giving positive feedback, but for example, I might, call out an exec that DM'd me to say, this is the first time I ever felt prepped walking into an interview. So I think quotes are a way that I like to approach showing the impact of my build because it's from my stakeholders and in their voice. And then I always try to tie it forward as well. So say like, because I automated this, I freed myself up to work on this other more important thing. So that kind of ROI of like what I'm now able to unlock is something that I see my exec actually remembering over time versus like a metric. So I think you can show the metric, but in summary, like I like to use quotes and then, tie it forward for what that unlocked for like the next level of my support.
I love that, Courtney. Awesome. So this question is from Aftab, and Aftab asks, "How do you prioritize use cases?" And Courtney, I think we have a, a visual you'd like to share. Is that right?
Yeah, we have this. So this isn't just for EAs, but I think sometimes like a framework for deciding where to start building is helpful, but you can also do it simpler. Think about where the pain lives. Think about the things that when they happen, it's like the thorn in your side throughout the day. So, for example, something as simple as like, I don't like it when someone after a meeting has to message me and say, "Hey, do you have the recording for that meeting?" And it's like, it's just something that I don't like to receive because I want to be perceived as like on top of things. And so that was something I like really quickly automated. Okay, every time we get a new Zoom recording in this account, like send it to the right Slack channel, and then no one has to like wonder when it's coming, where it's coming, or have to ping me for it. So sometimes you can start with like the thorns in your side or the pain, like the email inbox was like a big pain point for me because it was not my favorite thing to spend time on. So you can always start with that, but then if you want like a framework, I think this can help you figure out where to start. So like this has an effort axis and then an impact axis. So the goal is to, I think especially for EAs, is to start small, try to learn fast, and then work your way towards the high impact stuff over time. Like don't try to build this big perfect solution. So the sweet spot is like that bottom left box of those quick wins and those simple builds. Once you start getting those confidence and have a few of those things running, then you can start experimenting, like refining those existing process, like adding more AI. But then, yes, of course, over time, you can go for those like rethinking the work itself, tackling big builds. But it's really okay to skip those high effort, low impact ideas for now. Like those are interesting, but they're not going to move the needle. So, like, try to build momentum, start small, scale what works, and then let that keep opening the doors as you build more confidence. Christina, do you agree? Like I'd be curious for, you've been at Zapier for so long, like maybe if you can think back to your early days, how you decided
Mhm.
what to build.
I would completely agree with this framework here. I've never seen it in this visual before, and seeing it like this, it just makes sense. I think when I was back in support, I would see a lot of customers who would work on low impact stuff, but it would take so much effort, and it's just like our our time is limited, right? Like work on those other three areas over here and skip these ones for now, I'd say. So
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Totally.
Yeah. You mentioned your inbox approach. And so Steve here asked a question. What approach gave you just an hour's work a week for Wade's inbox?
Yeah, so this is actually something I demoed at Zap Connect. So I think Brian's going to roll the clip of that demo. But essentially, I trained an agent within Zapier to think like me and Wade and to be able to automatically categorize, archive, escalate emails to the right person, place, and channel. So it's a big system starting with just inbox categorization, and then I built on top of that. So like things from customers get escalated to support, things that are hiring get escalated to recruiting, but it all starts with the categorization. So yeah, Ryan, if you can roll that demo I did at Zap Connect, I think it would be helpful for people to see.
So let's see this in action with our demos and show what that looks like in practice, starting where a lot of the pain lives, the email inbox. So Connor's message was simple: start with the pain, scale people, make it safe. Inbox triage is exactly the kind of pain that we're talking about here. My CEO that I support gets a ton of emails a day, probably over 100, and it's a mess. It requires constant contextual research, and it isn't a simple when X then Y rule. It's a nightmare, honestly. So, this is why it's one of the first things I wanted to automate. Here's a quick view of Wade's inbox, which shows the end output of this agent. And the reason why it's so clear and clean is because of this automation I've built. All of these color coded labels were applied automatically without me in the loop. So let me show you exactly how this works. The magic happens within these agent instructions. Notice how it's structured like a decision tree with priority levels. The first priority, I'm asking for the agent to check for action required categories. We do not want this agent to miss really important, urgent emails, which is why we're choosing the color red for the label and making sure it's really clear that it requires our CEO's action. This would be for internal requests, C-level communications, board emails, strategic partnership opportunities, things that we don't want to drop. The orange labels will be the ones that catch EA tasks. So that could be travel, press inquiries, meetings, depending on the things that you usually triage from your exec's inbox. And then we have a black label to catch hiring related emails. Next, after it checks which items have urgent action needed, it goes to do some research, check our CRM, HubSpot, to analyze whether it might be a customer or partner we already have in our system. So the way it's clever here is that it simultaneously checks our CRM and analyzes email patterns. So if it finds a match in HubSpot, that takes precedence. Otherwise, it uses smart pattern recognition to figure out whether the email suggests it's from a customer or partner. Finally, we've got everything else. Newsletters filtered out. Internal updates get marked as FYI, and then spam automatically is handled. No more junk cluttering in the inbox and wasting your time. So it goes and applies the most appropriate Gmail label based on its analysis. And if multiple categories apply, it knows how to prioritize them. We also have some special considerations here, making sure we handle obvious junk, making sure that calendar invites can be automatically archived since we already get those as EAs, and then making sure it has a few details for error handling. We wanted to know that if it's not sure, to leave it unread in the inbox. We don't want something to accidentally get archived. And when in doubt, prioritize not labeling over incorrect labeling. So here's what makes agents incredibly powerful is the troubleshooting. Every single email processed will show up in the activity with complete transparency. So you can check and see exactly how this agent runs. So here's an example of a recent run. I can see exactly which email triggered the run and view the whole content if I'd like. Then I can see what the agent was thinking step by step as it goes through the categorization workflow. So in this example, it's finding that this is a promotional newsletter that should probably be archived. It correctly routes the priority, checks if by happenstance this sender is a customer, and then make sure it categorizes it correctly. So you can see finally it has newsletters labeled and requires no action from Wade, and it's not a customer or partner. Automatically applied. Also, if something needs action, you can go right here. You can instantly see where the agent failed and how to fix it. No more guessing why an email didn't get categorized. And if you need to tweak the logic, super simple. You can go back in here, configure, and chat with Copilot anytime to give it feedback on anything it miscategorized. So let's talk numbers. Wade gets at least 100 emails per day, and I'm probably underestimating here. So before this agent, it took me at least 15 minutes a day just sorting and labeling emails. That was also constant context switching between inbox and other tasks, and I was always fearing a risk of missing critical emails in the noise. EAs spending time manually categorizing is just not the best use of our time. After this agent, almost zero time is spent on email sorting. Instant visual prioritization with color codes. Critical emails automatically get surfaced, and EAs can focus on high value work instead of email management. The ripple effect is that's at least an hour saved per week just on email sorting. Multiply that by everyone who could use this system. We're talking about hundreds of hours returned to strategic work each month. The best part, this same framework can be tweaked for any executive specific workflow, whether they have different priorities, different labels. You can use the same intelligent automation background. So, who wants to be next? Get their 15 minutes back every day. Setting this up takes about 15 minutes, so the time savings start immediately today. Before we leave the inbox, though, I want to quickly plug how the same agent could grow with you with small add ons that compound. So, first example, customer inquiries. You could add an instruction to this agent where if it detects a customer and it smells like a support request, it posts, let's say, a two-line summary of the inquiry to the support leader Slack channel. And it mentions the account owner from the CRM and pins the original email link. So there's fast triage with zero internal forwarding. Another example would be hiring messages. Imagine if when this agent sees a candidate inquiry, it drafts a polite reply that points to our open roles and tips for applying, then queues it for EA review. One click to send, and every candidate gets a consistent, helpful response. That's exactly what Connor was talking about. Start with a painful, high leverage workflow, make it safe and reliable, and then scale people by expanding to adjacent flows as your trust with the agent grows. All right, now let's jump over to a Zap so you can see an example of a workflow that is more standardized.
That's awesome, Courtney. And what I really like, Courtney, by the way, is that I think if I heard you correctly, you said something along the lines of it being, it started off small and then you kind of like built a system that just kept growing and growing and growing as you iterated and added more instructions. Is that right?
Yeah, totally. So we started with just the categorization just to see how it would work. And once we were like, okay, this is amazing, then we started to see once it labels something as a certain label, what can we do next? What's the next step in the process that we can fix? So like once we fix that first bottleneck, you can go and fix the next of like, okay, we're not getting back to candidates as quick as we could because it's not Wade's number one priority, but he wants us to be hiring the best people. That is like part of his job. And so we knew that we needed to do something next for those hiring emails that helped us get through the next bottleneck. So sometimes doing an automation will just bring you the next part of the process you need to solve. But that's why I think it's great that you can just build over time.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's kind of like what Jordan here in the chat said. It's like the low impact is maybe starting off with an agent that just deletes or archives the obvious and consistent spam or junk emails, and then growing and iterating from there. So that's awesome input.
Yeah, and I see one question in the chat I can probably answer quickly about how long this process took. The initial setup, I swear, was like less than 30 minutes, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And that's because of that co-pilot feature. So like, because you can talk to that co-pilot in natural language, and I'll show it in a moment so you can see how easy it is. But because I could just communicate and dictate to it what I was already doing in the inbox, it was pretty easy for it to start thinking about how to make that more repetitive. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Courtney. So the next question that comes from Christine G is, what are 3 high impact automations that are often overlooked, but we should consider implementing right away? I can take the first one. So here's a deceptively simple, but really impactful automation that you can set up for your exec or multiple execs. So I support Brandon, our chief people officer, and he uses this automation to solve this issue of, not issue, but he wants to welcome new hires personally, and that makes a huge difference. It sets the tone for connection and culture, but for many busy execs, those messages can easily slip through the cracks during busy hiring periods or travel weeks. So what we've set up here is an automation where when a new hire is marked as started in Bamboo HR, so that's the platform that we use here at Zapier, the workflow automatically finds them in Slack and it sends them a personal welcome message from Brandon. So it feels timely and it happens automatically. Although the initial message is automated, Brandon can then send replies in Slack afterwards. So it's about making sure that Brandon doesn't miss sending the first message to the person that just started at Zapier. So you can easily customize this so other leaders can send messages to their own teams or regions or even other things. So an idea maybe is that you set this up for automatic birthday greetings, or Brandon has something where he set it up so that when someone from Zapier leaves, a couple of months later, he'll send them an email to just send a quick check-in, and that kind of kickstarts a thread between that person who has now left Zapier and to keep that connection with them. So that's one thing that he has set up that's really made a difference in impact. And Courtney, off to you for that this use case.
Yeah, I want to share one from one of our customers. So Viva is an EA group that has a ton of EAs in Latin America, and a lot of their job was creating pre-meeting briefs, which they call PMBs. And so that was eating up hours for their team each week. And so Dania, who we can share the customer story link if you want to read more about the other things they're doing with automation, but they created this automation that does all of those briefs automatically. So when a new Google Calendar event with external attendees is created, the workflow is triggered and it goes and researches the attendee details, the company context, pulls them into this like templatized Google Doc designed for meeting prep for all the execs. And so this allows them to just go in and check for accuracy to make sure, again, like there is still a human in the loop EA element, that nothing was like crazy off the rails. But this took away most of their manual research and all of that formatting time. So this was a great one that I like to showcase because it really inspired adoption across all of the EAs. Once Dania built this, it was something that they then, all of their team was starting to use and really started making a company-wide impact. So you can see once you start building automations that you can think, okay, now that this has helped my exec or me, how can I then like share this with my company so that more folks can be helped in this way? So that's a lot of what we do internally, as well as figure out how we can, enable the whole company. But yeah, there's one more for the third use case. This is one that Christina actually built for Wade, for my exec, when she was supporting the CEO office when she first moved over to the EA role. And we were going back and forth and manually creating a to-do list for Wade in a Google Doc. It's embarrassing to even think about how much time I used to spend on doing this for him. But now we've created this system where each time he saves a message in Slack, clicks that save button, which is basically every Slack he receives, like those saved Slack messages get sent to a channel where I can see them as well, so that it's not a black hole of what's coming to Wade. And then this system also summarizes the message and creates a clear, concise to-do item for Wade. And it also identifies whether it's something that requires his action or whether it was just like an FYI that was sent his way. So this system like intelligently routes basically all of the Slacks he receives into his coda to-do list for the correct priority, and assigns even a date. So this has changed the color of the sky for how I work, because I basically just have to like skim that instead of creating these structured like prioritized tasks. So this is within Zapier's workflow product, which we call Zaps. So while I just showed you an agent in that demo, this is actually a Zap. And so I'd love to actually show how easy this is to build. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to screen share for a second and show you how Copilot works and how it can build this in real time. So hopefully the live demo angels are with me today, but here is, this is the homepage of Zapier when you come into it. And Copilot is here right at the top. You can see Copilot in multiple places around Zapier, but we're going to give it exactly what I just said. So help me build a workflow that sends saved Slack messages to Coda, summarizes them into concise task titles, categorizes them, and assigns a priority based on urgency. I could also add in that step of like send it to a Slack channel for my visibility, but you can always, again, add that after, like build first. So you can see that Copilot is actually thinking through this process, and it shows you its work. So it's saying, okay, here's what the user wants to do. And then I'm going to help you build this workflow. It's going to verify that Zapier has the right integrations with Slack and Coda, which we do. And then it's making sure we also have the right triggers. So a trigger is what kicks off this workflow. And the trigger that we're using here is saved message in Slack. So it's finding this, it's creating this, it's creating this proposed system for me. So it's saying, here's what we should build. We should build a single Zap that has AI processing for the summarization, categorization, and priority, and then suggest ChatGPT integration here. And so it didn't quite guess my trigger here directly, and that's okay. It guessed that new reaction added, which is another great way to do this. So for example, if you want to triage your own tasks, one thing I like to do when someone tags me in an action item is put the eyes emoji on it, because that means I've seen it, I'm looking at it, and I'm working on it. And so I could set this up for myself where every time I add the eyes emoji to a Slack, it sends it to my personal to-do list. So you can use the new emoji reaction. But what I do want to change is that it's saying that direct save message trigger isn't available, but I know it is because I use it. So I'm going to go in and say, okay, let's try to build this. And it'll actually pass you over into our workflow builder to really start building this Zap. And if you haven't used Zapier before, what it's going to do then is have you authenticate your accounts. So Zapier is a pass-through between your apps. So I already probably have my Slack account authenticated in here, but we are going to change the trigger to new saved message, which is the one I actually wanted to use here. And then I'm already authenticated. I will just continue. It's keeping building on the side over here. You can see it's just continuing to try to do as much work for you as possible. And then there's also these like helpful tips that'll pop up of, you can use AI by Zapier for this step instead if you don't have a ChatGPT account. So it goes through and really just builds everything for you, which is why I love the Copilot, because it makes me feel like I only then just have to go in and check for accuracy and run some tests. And it's already done most of the building for me. So it's saying, okay, the only thing I couldn't do was I couldn't sign into Coda for you. So great, we're stuck there. I signed into Coda. Oops, it took me out of that window. You have to get rid of the API key if you haven't authenticated your account already, but I did. And then it's all set up. So I just wanted to showcase this because I think sometimes building within Zapier can be intimidating, but if you start with this Copilot, it does so much of the thinking for you that you really hardly have to even do any of the actual technical building. So yeah, that you can keep going back and forth with this. I suggest trying out Copilot and just shooting your ideas in it, and you can give it feedback too and say like, hey, you did that wrong, actually switch to this. So yeah, that's my quick demo of Copilot.
Nice. Yeah.
And I'll fix this out just so that Christina, you can go to the other questions.
Yeah. Kenna asked a really good question where Kenna was mentioning that they don't use Coda. So where could the information live? And something that's great is that Zapier has over 1,000 integrations. And so it's really tool agnostic. So Wade, our CEO, uses Coda for his task tracker, but this could really go anywhere. You could send the to-do list or to-do task anywhere where your exec or you live. So maybe you use a tool called Todoist or Google Sheets or any sort of like task tracker or spreadsheet. You can send it wherever works for you and your exec. So, all right. So let's jump into the next theme, which is human judgment and team enablement. The first question is the next question here from Jennifer. How do you identify which parts of an operations workflow are best suited for automations versus those that still need human oversight? What do you think, Cortney?
Yeah, I'll just quickly read this because I know we want to get to some live Q&A too, but I think the simplest rule here is automate the repeatable pattern, but still keep the relationship part human. So if it needs empathy, tone, or judgment, that's something I do. That's not something AI does. But if it's something I do the same way all the time, like prepping notes, reminding people to fill out updates, summarizing something, all of that's kind of fair game. So I think of these, the AI powered agents or workflows as my assistant. So I let it handle the boring parts and then pass it over to me so I can add like my intuition or context. So I think the sweet spot is like the partnership there of the workflow proposes something, you review, and then you send it out. So that keeps like the speed and trust side of things.
Yeah, someone in the chat mentioned that as EAs, our superpower is soft skills, and I'm in complete agreement with that. So if something involves nuance or tone or emotional intelligence, that's where we can stay in the loop. So AI can tee things up beautifully, but that human touch is what maintains the trust and alignment. So I kind of think of it in a lens of less of like, what can I automate, and more of what can I delegate to AI so I can show up at a higher level. So that's where that leverage of having a more strategic impact can happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for how to help upskill an entire team? How can we give everyone a sense of agency to build solutions? And this is from Jocelyn.
This is a great question. And one of my colleagues, Emily Maybe, has actually created this guide on how to be an AI champion. So I'm just going to skim over it here because this will be in the slides after. But essentially, like when people ask how to upskill a whole team, the answer is don't do it for them, but create the conditions for them to learn for you. So an AI champion is something we've been using internally for a while within teams to really be someone in each function or team that bridges the gap here. So they're the people that make these things feel approachable because they're doing it within their function and helping others do the same. Like they're usually the most curious and willing to try things person on the team. And I think without like having a specific champion in your EA team or your exec team, the adoption does stay like pretty scattered or reactive. So with this champion, we have this guide that we'll share for how teams can just like start learning more in public, trying things, sharing wins. And I think this is a natural role for an EA or chief of staff because, again, like we already are connecting the dots, spotting the inefficiencies, coaching people through change. And this program just puts a little bit of structure on that. So Christina, yeah, if you go to the next slide, this has like a little bit more detail about what champions are and aren't. And then the final slide here is just about more logistics of how a champion operates. So for example, you need to protect your time. So you should, block 1 to 2 hours a week and schedule this block on your calendar. You need to be able to experiment safely. Here's how you can contribute to your community. So it gives you like a little bit of a playbook for how to become this or how to try to pitch this to like leaders in your company for why they should invest in folks in this type of role.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, shall we dive into the live Q&A time?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to see what's coming in, and hopefully we can power through what folks have. So Ryan, I think you're going to guide us through the live Q&A.
Yeah, let's do it. Hey, everybody. There are so many good questions. I'm going to start with the most upvoted one from Jack here. Jack's asking a great question here. Meeting scheduling, such a personal task. There's a lot of preferences and context. How are y'all thinking about AI and automation to do that whole task that still meets the CEO's needs?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I don't use AI right now for actual deciding where things are placed in the calendar. That's definitely something that still I think needs a judgment from the EA, but there are certain pieces that you can automate here or use AI for. So like, for example, Wade gets, dozens of requests for podcast appearances each month. And it was taking me so much to go through them and get Wade's input on whether he wanted to do them or not. And so what I've done is create like a GPT and ChatGPT that has this whole scoring rubric. It takes all of those requests for speaking engagement emails and has an AI output of exactly why we should or should not do each of those. So I can, match that to Wade's preferences of what I know he likes to, where he likes to speak and where he doesn't, and then use AI to do part of that task. But I am not using AI to do the whole task of meeting scheduling. Christina, what about you?
I'm not right now, but I think it's okay to say this, but we are huge fans of VimCal.
Yeah.
And some folks might be using VimCal already in this session, but VimCal is amazing for scheduling. Yeah, big shout out to them.
Yeah, they have a lot of smart scheduling and AI tools like automatically, time zone conversion and stuff like that.
One thing,
you can color code calendar events, I believe. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
Oh, nice. And one thing y'all were making me think too, and talking about soft skills, it was making me think of like who better to build automations than folks that have a high skill in soft skills and a high threshold for it, because it also means just kind of like what you're saying, Cortney, like there are just things, maybe AI can do these things in like a year from now, but you probably have a pretty high threshold for where you use it. And so you're not just applying it everywhere to like drive up efficiency because it's going to break the workflow or it's going to be crappy experience. And so kind of until it's ready, you're not going to go there yet until you have high confidence that it's going to like meet the soft skill threshold where that you can automate that.
Yeah, I could like probably articulate what exactly I'd want to see for me to feel confident, but yeah, not right now.
Great. Let's see. Maybe you could talk about this a little bit. It gets a little bit into the like, there's two questions here from Rachel and Nina. I'll read them both and then I'll put one up on screen. Obviously, like in Wade's email, there are things that are like confidential and things where you're having it categorize and read. Like, how do you think about that? How have you talked to Wade about that, of just managing maybe some more of those confidential things? And do you have any fear of that stuff getting passed through AI or any of the automations?
No, I don't. I think because, yes, of course, naturally at first I was like, wait, let me understand how this works before I suggest this as a path forward. But Zapier as a company has given a lot of guardrails around when we can and cannot use AI. And the things that gave me confidence here is that, first of all, the information already exists elsewhere. So it's already existing in Google, which has, Gemini built in. And what's happening is Zapier is just it's just passing through Zapier and going back to the inbox. And so it's not like we're creating this data and sharing it anywhere. It's just passing right from Gmail to Zapier back to Gmail, where the information already lives. And then we also have we have a ChatGPT enterprise account, which means the models aren't trained on that knowledge or anything. So I am confident that of that. But we also have a ton of like security and actual things that you can show your IT team so that they can, have confidence that your data is not getting out.
The thing that I would add there too is that for folks who might already, maybe their companies use ChatGPT or any of the other tools out there, you can basically bring your own login to Zapier. So it's using your own account and not, it's using your account, which is what's great.
Totally. Let's see if we can get two more before the top of the hour here. I think this is a good one because you've shown Zaps and you've shown agents, and it would actually be good to clarify two things: the difference between a Zap and an agent, and then for you, Cortney and Christina, like when you decide to use one or the other.
Yeah, so the difference is that there's a spectrum here. So you can have a Zap that has no AI in it. Then you can add AI to a Zap. Then you can have an agent. And so there's this scale. A Zap is something that you want to run the exact same way every time. So for example, Dania with the pre-meeting briefs wanted those pre-meeting briefs to be specifically structured in a certain way in that end result Google Doc. So you could have built that pre-meeting brief via an agent, but agents are by nature more creative. They can do more processing and decision making that's not quite clear. So you give them an end goal, and then they kind of like can have some creativity in the mix to decide how to get there. And so if you want something that is super standardized as the output the exact same way every time, that's when you use a Zap. And then an agent is something that has more reasoning and creativity built in by nature. So if an agent does the same thing twice, it might do it slightly different each time. Just like how if you go to ChatGPT and ask it the same question twice, it's going to give you relatively the same answer, but it's not going to be exactly the same. And so that's how you can kind of decide whether you want to use that. And so with a Zap, though, you can build in an AI step for creativity in one part of your process. So for example, the creativity for the meeting brief might be how it does research on the internet about the person that your exec is meeting with, but you still want it standardized in this template at the end. So you can kind of decide where you want that, inference built in versus where you want it to be like very deterministic and strict.
Love it. Anything to add, Christina? That was
That was a great description, Cortney. Yeah.
Awesome. This is an interesting question because I imagine there are lots of folks that might be in this position. I have some thoughts here, but I'd be curious to get yours as well. We have a big default to action culture here at Zapier, but I think for some folks, they might have access to ChatGPT, they can get access to Zapier, but maybe they're not fully greenlit just yet. What recommendations would y'all have for someone who's kind of needs to maybe prove out some value as they go? And I don't know, what comes to mind here for both of you?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from experience when we were trying to get VimCal approved for the EA team, because that was something that wasn't covered in the budget. So I gave them a formula. I said, I tracked for about a week or two how much time I was spending on scheduling. And then I got a trial of VimCal and saw how much it sped up that process. And so I said, if I can save each EA on the team 1 hour a week, here is the multiply that by their salary per hour. I'm like, here is what that's costing the business. And then here's what VimCal costs. And so it was like a very clear formula of if you say no to this, you're wasting like company money basically. And we're very like fiscally responsible here, being self-funded. So I found that like helps really the leadership team. But again, like I think it's not an if, it's a when. Like companies are going to have to jump on this. Like they're going to have to start using these tools. So some of it you might just have to wait and see, or start using it in your personal life, and at least keep upskilling yourself so you don't fall behind.
I love that. I think that's a great place to end. And Cortney, I'll let you and Christina wrap up here. I'm going to go off stage and I'll push a link for this right now.
Cool. So yeah, we'll share here's a link to our use case deck, which has a lot of templates, has demo videos, has all the AI champion stuff, all that information for y'all to use as you start building. Feel free to connect with me and Christina on LinkedIn if you want to ask any further questions. And just thank you for joining, and thank you to the whole Zapier EA team for helping us, helping inspire all these use cases that we built, and for being these leaders in AI and automation. So yeah, appreciate everybody. We'll send some follow-ups in email as well. But thanks, Christina, for leading us through it.
Thank you. Thanks, folks.
Bye, everybody.